I have 5 different types of people. And so when the questions come up, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? If this guy's got the life experience here and this guy's got the life experience here, they can compare notes and come up with a solution much easier, I think, than if everything's very homogenous and everybody's the same.
Hello, my name is Moryah Jackson, and I am the host of the podcast Lead with Heart. We love talking to people to learn about their personal journey and give you tips on how you can lead with heart. Today, we have Kevin Oliver with us, and we are so looking forward to hearing about his leadership journey. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
I would love to hear what has shaped your leadership journey and how has that impacted you to lead with heart?
Well, I would say when I started, my main career has been retail management, but I always like to say I kind of backed into that as a career. Um, Started out straight out of college working in commercial radio. Actually, I was a radio disc jockey. Um, Still have the disc jockey voice there sometimes, but that was one of those things where at the time it didn't pay enough to have that be my only job. So retail became a side gig at the time. And after discovering that I was good at it and moving up within the industry I was working in at the time, the side gig then became the main gig. So that's one of those things I always tell people. I said, don't discount the stuff that you're doing outside of your job, because sometimes that can become your new job. So, but I can trace my own character traits to my upbringing. I was raised by a Navy veteran down in Charleston, South Carolina, who was also a scoutmaster. So I was involved in Boy Scouts. And Boy Scouts, I think, has gone through a lot of changes over the years, but it is still, I think, a great training ground for future leaders. It teaches the right character traits. It teaches the things that you need in any situation to become that leader and to take that leadership role, I think.
No, I definitely agree with that. I love that you were in Boy Scouts. My 2 sons were in Scouts as well, and it's huge for character development. It's such a great way, again, to teach those basic character traits that are timeless. I mean, you always need to have those character skills. So I absolutely love that. I want to hear a little bit more about you being a DJ. You definitely still have that DJ voice, but what made you interested in being a DJ? And then how did you know, this isn't going to work out financially. Let me do something else. And then you went into retail. I think that's a really insightful process that could help some of our listeners who are trying to figure out their own path.
Sure. Well, I went to the University of South Carolina, and in the 80s and even up till now, they have a very active, very popular campus radio station, and was a student DJ there. Not everybody at the station, in fact, most of the people at the station are not broadcast journalist students or going into that career. I hadn't really planned on it myself. I actually graduated with an English degree from USC. But the first thing I was able to find work-wise out of school was at a radio station down in Charleston. I had my air check tape, which was me recorded speaking on the air at the USC station, walked into 3 or 4 stations in Charleston, handed them the tape and said, "Hey, call me if you need somebody." A week later, I get a call from the classic rock station down on Folly Beach, and they hired me for afternoons, evenings, weekend nights. I was there for about 4 years.
Wow, that's impressive. So I love your hustle. You hit the pavement. I think that's an important thing for, young people to know. It's important to go out and do face to face and do what you need to do to accomplish your goals. But also I love that's networking. It's people. Somebody took a chance on you. Like how awesome is that and gave you an opportunity and you stayed there for 4 years. That's pretty impressive.
Well, I always say I've never been afraid to talk to people. I've never been afraid to just walk up to someone and start a conversation. Um, the and that serves me well as far as changing from job to job, career to career. The thing with retail over the years is in retail, really the only way to get ahead, um, because you kind of get stuck in one particular company. The only way to get ahead is to move from one business or one company to another. Take that experience you've learned Then you go to the next one and say, hey, look, I've done all of this, but I want this level. I want this spot.
I absolutely love that you say that. Sometimes people don't look too fondly on those of us because I've shifted careers a lot. They say you move around too much, you have too many jobs, but I feel like you learn valuable transferable skills. I also believe that you learn from experience. So definitely thank you for sharing that because I think it's something that might kind of be a best kept secret. You don't hear too many people say, you should move around and take those experiences with you and, reach out and say, hey, I've had these experiences, but I want to do this. I'm a firm believer that growth comes when you stretch yourself, you do something different. So it's awesome to hear you say that.
When you're selling things, retail basically is a sales job. So I've sold all kinds of different things, but the actual techniques are pretty much the same. I went from my first retail jobs were working in record stores back when there were one or two of those in every mall. I worked for Sears selling sporting goods equipment. I spent my longest retail position was with Lowe's selling everything from washers and dryers to lumber. So the basic concepts and the basic techniques are the same. It's, they always talk about, you're selling widgets, just to make up an item because that widget, the way you sell it can be very similar from industry to industry.
Nope, I think that's great. You mentioned you are not afraid to talk to people. You never meet a stranger. Where do you think your ability to connect comes from? Or, also, do you have some tips for people on how to connect? How can we help people that may be a little bit more hesitant or fearful for talking to other people when you obviously have a natural gift for that?
Well, the one thing I've learned over the years is the best way to talk business is not to talk business. You can talk to somebody because most people, if they go to an event or go somewhere, whether it's a networking event or something, and they say, oh, I need to talk to three people about my product, they get stressed out, they get nervous about it, and it doesn't really work well for them. But if they just go and just start talking to people and have those conversations about anything other than business, you've created that relationship, you've created that connection, and then you can say at the end of it, you can say, hey, let me call you next week, and then you talk to them about what it is you really want to talk about.
And I mean, it sounds like, you're leading with heart when you connect with people on a human level. We're all people. And I do believe that we have more in common than we think we do. And so it's really nice to hear you say, just talk to people. Just go and talk about what you're interested in. So I think that's really good advice.
Well, I think, at its most basic, sales jobs and retail is about solving somebody's problem. They're not walking in to spend money with you unless they have something they need to fix, they have something they need to change, they have something they want to do, they have an issue or a problem they're trying to address. Um, so if you can learn what that problem is, then it's easier to sell them that something because they may be looking at this, but you may hear their problem if you're listening and you say, oh, well, that's fine, but here, this will work much better for you, or this will do a better job, or you'll spend less money doing it this way. So,
I absolutely love that you mentioned listening. How hard is it to listen, or what tips do you have about listening? Because I believe listening is one of those lead with heart skills. And sometimes it's hard to listen. People want to talk or share what they have to say, or, they may miss out on some things. So, what tips or tricks do you have for listening?
um, I'll be honest, I'm a terrible listener. I will be, I would much rather talk than listen. Um, to be honest, but
Mhm.
again, over the years, I've learned that if I don't shut up, I don't hear what they're saying. So I mentally have to force myself to stop talking at some point. And every once in a while, and if I get really worked up about something, yeah, I'll go off for 5 or 10 minutes on something. And then I'll look around and go, wait a minute, nobody else has said a word here because they can't get a word in edgewise. So that's not the type of person I really want to be. But it's one of those things that if you realize that about yourself, it's easier to recognize it when those symptoms start appearing, and then you can kind of pull back mentally and say, okay, let's hold it back, let's stop and let somebody else get a word in, and then you can again They always talk about listening. You either listen to talk, or you listen to respond, or you listen to understand. And if you're not listening to understand what they're doing or what they're asking or talking about, then by the time it's your turn to talk, you don't know what to say because you haven't really been listening.
Mhm. That's really powerful. So I'm curious to know, how did you find out that you were more of a talker than a listener? And then how did you like teach yourself or train yourself to say, "Hey, I need to pause and let somebody else talk"? Because I mean, that's pretty impressive for you to acknowledge that you are a talker and then to say, "Hey, I've had to train myself to do this." So how did you get there?
Well, over the years, in the retail positions I've had and some of the other positions within the retail environment, I've done a lot of training. I've been a trainer, a district supervisor, that kind of thing, where my job wasn't necessarily to do the job. It was to teach somebody else to do the job and then leave them to it. So over the years, I've had to do a lot of talking. It's just happened, and I'm much more comfortable talking about something I know about, that I have some knowledge, that I don't have to refer to notes. If I'm comfortable with the information up front, then yes, I have no problem talking about it. Now, I can get into a situation where I may not know much about it. So then, yes, I'm tending to listen more because I'm trying to learn, not trying to give that knowledge. I'm trying to get that knowledge. So there's different situations where it's when you're a trainer, it helps to be able to talk because people are sitting there listening to you trying to learn. So having that speaking ability. I mean, I took public speaking in school, I think, at one point. I don't know if I was any good at it at the time or not, or whether some of it must have rubbed off. I've just never been uncomfortable in front of a crowd. It's just been me. So,
That's awesome. That's a great natural gift that you have. So that's wonderful. I did hear you say you've I did hear you say you've led many different teams. You worked with a lot of different people. What tips do you have for working with different people? I'm sure, people from different places, different skill sets. How do you get people to work together and accomplish goals?
that's a great question because, and really, I think overall, the best teams I've had and the best crews I've had have included people from different areas of life. If I had five of the same guys working for me, we'd probably do one thing well. But I have five different types of people, and so when the questions come up, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? If this guy's got the life experience here and this guy's got the life experience here, they can compare notes and come up with a solution much easier, I think, than if everything's very homogenous and everybody's the same. And plus, that's boring.
I absolutely love that, and I think that definitely demonstrates leading with heart. You're giving people with different voices, you're giving people with different backgrounds a voice and an opportunity to share their skill set and their expertise. And so I think that's very smart of you to realize it's good to tap into those different experiences, and it makes the team stronger. So I commend you for that. So, what does leading with heart mean to you? How do you define that?
Well, um, one of the things I let me just give you an example. So 5 years ago, of course, the big story was COVID and the lockdown and all that. Well, during that time frame, I was in the middle of a 5 or 6 year stretch as a store manager for a chain called Dollar General. Very familiar. Most people are familiar with them at this point. They've got 18,000 stores across the United States. Um, it's very high volume, very high stress, very high product flow retail. Um, we had a crew of about six of us at the store and on my staff, and COVID hit. We never closed a day because we were a food retailer. We were considered essential retail, essential business. So they never forced us to close. We had to follow some different rules and things. And of course, the great toilet paper scare of 2020 when everybody ran out of toilet paper. So I was selling it off the back of the trucks as they came in, basically. So there was a lot of stress involved, not just from the staff, but from the customers. And we adapted differently. Every day was different, and everything brought a new challenge, a new rule, new laws, whatever. And I basically told my staff at the time, I said, we are going to do whatever we can to help this local community because Dollar General puts a store every 5 or 6 miles. So we're basically the neighborhood general store at the time. And the big box stores and the big grocery stores were running out of stuff because shipments were disrupted. So they started coming to us, or they were closing or had different hours. So our business increased. But I told them, I said, we've got to be able to help people and help them deal with that stress by making it as easy as possible. You know, it's one of those things where our sales really boomed. Some of that was the situation we were in and the environment that the retail was in at the time. But I do think that us just being that kind presence to our customers kind of helped. They responded to it.
That's really impressive. And for you to say, despite the stress, despite the kind of chaos, you're like, we're going to be here for our community and we're going to figure it out. And so, you nailed it. You cared about the community. You were there. You made things happen, and business was booming. I think that's a good example of it shows doing well by doing good goes hand in hand. And you can still make a profit by doing what's right and caring about your community. So I commend you for that. I mean, I think that's the epitome of leading with heart. You were serving without an expectation, but you were able to benefit from that as well. So that's amazing. And I can't believe that was 5 years ago. Time flies. Has there been a moment where you have redefined success for yourself?
Oh, absolutely. The One of my district level positions that I had was with a company where I was covering parts of 3 states, Carolinas and Georgia, driving 1,000 miles a week, out of town Monday through Thursday. I had a wife and 1 kid already. Um, when my second child was born, this would have been 2003, sat down and made the decision. Okay, yes, this is a great job. Yes, I'm doing well, got potential for advancement here, but I'm not home. The family, so I stepped back from that position and found something locally, and that would allow me to stay home and be home for the family and for the kids and that kind of thing over the next number of years. And I thought about it at the time. I said, well, this is kind of, I was disappointed because I was like, well, I'm kind of cutting off my career over here and starting back over here. So it felt like moving backwards. But that was the point where I went to work for Lowe's, and I stayed there for 15 years and moved up the advancement ladder that entire time. So it worked out to be a good thing, whether I realized it at the time or not.
No, that's really great. I think sometimes you have this vision of what does success look like? What does excelling look like? And, you start living a certain way, going down a certain career path, and you realize this really isn't in alignment with what I want to do or what's important to me at this time. And so I commend you for realizing, my job is not in alignment, or rather my career is not in alignment with my family values. And so, that's not an easy decision to make. Do you have any tips for maybe our listeners who might be dealing with something like that right now?
Well, I would just say that you shouldn't be afraid to take that chance to make that change if it makes sense for you or your family. I'll go back to the same situation. The other thing that happened at the time was my wife also made a career change. When our second was born, we decided, okay, well, we're spending X number of dollars at the child care center for her to work, and somebody else was raising our kids. So she actually quit her job completely, became a stay at home mom, and we figured out how to survive on my salary. But as a result of that, she started taking in a couple of our friends' kids and being their in home daycare for them. And got paid a little bit for that, but what that resulted in was she decided to develop, rather than just be a babysitter, she said, "Oh, I'm gonna take this opportunity. I'm gonna develop a preschool curriculum around for these 3 4-year-olds." And that curriculum and that start became the preschool at our church 2 years later that is still going 20 years later. So that preschool, that was when we left when she left that position 2 years ago, finally, after having taught at the preschool for 19 years, they were up to 60 or 70 kids every year. So that one decision that we made back in 2000, early 2000s, has now affected several generations of children, not just our own.
That's such a powerful story and talk about legacy. And I mean, really, that demonstrates leading with heart. You said so much that was so rich. I mean, this really resonates with me as a mother, a parent who works outside of the home. I have two sons. My husband also works. And so we've had to make decisions about our career as well. And as you know, I worked in the upstate for 7 years. And so that was an intentional decision to where I would travel back and forth, and our family worked together as a team and made it happen. And I'm glad that, I'm back now, but you have to make decisions that work for you. And I appreciate you saying that, what works for you and what works for your family. And I really don't think there are enough conversations, that we have about what does it mean to have two parents who work outside of the home? What does that mean for your family? What does that mean for your child's development? And one of the things that I like to tell young parents is just be intentional and do what works best for you at the time. And just like you said it, Kevin, have the courage to do something different if it's not working for you. I think sometimes people think, oh, I have to stick with this because I made this decision, but you always have the opportunity to change, but it definitely takes some courage.
And there's not a one size fits all thing. I would never tell somebody, "Oh, you need to quit your job and take care of your kids." That's up to them. There are different ways of doing things. You've got family members, you've got friends. There's different and different levels of those kind of things. But I kind of laugh because when we had kids, we were married for 9 years before we had children. So we waited a while, almost for a while, weren't sure we could have children. So when we did, of course, my wife went completely overboard, bought all the books, read everything, and none of it was right for us. So what to expect when you're expecting. Well,
I love it.
we didn't expect this. We didn't expect that. What do we do now? It's not in the book.
I
You
love
wing
it.
it, basically, and you do the best
Uh,
you can.
you nailed it. There really is no manual, and it's not one size fits all. And I hope that's encouragement for you and your wife to write a book,
Well,
because
I
your
will
way.
say that our children, that 4 and 2 year old that they started the preschool with back then, are now 22 and 24. One's a college graduate teaching preschool herself down in North Charleston, following in her mother's footsteps. And the other one's getting ready to graduate from Clemson in a few weeks.
I love it. So that shows
I
that
feel like we did
you
a
did a
good
good
job.
job. Yep, you did a good job. Good job. Pat yourself on the back. That's awesome. That's a great testament to what you all did. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I know that you love music and you do a phenomenal job of building community through music. If you would share a little bit about your passion and how you connect with people through music.
Well, depends on how far you want me to go back. But so this is when people find out that I'm a music fan, they're, "Oh, what kind of music do you like?" Well, my usual response is, "I like good music." Because the range of what I enjoy is so wide. It's just hard to explain in a few words. But I always go back to this point when I was a kid. Okay, so I was born in 1967. So the internet didn't exist, Google didn't exist, Spotify didn't exist. So you had to really actively find music. You couldn't. It didn't just come to you, except for television. So every Saturday in the mornings, they would show American Bandstand, Dick Clark, pop music stuff, and they would show Soul Train right in a row. And then on Saturday evenings, my parents watched Hee Haw, which was country music, and they watched the Lawrence Welk Show, which was champagne, big band, and jazz and vocal music. So I blame those four shows on my musical taste. I blame my musical taste on those four shows, and that covers a great deal of it. It you laugh, but there's quite a bit there that I recognize now as, oh, this is kind of why I like this, because I heard this every Saturday night for 15 years as a kid. But having, I think the key for most people as far as music exposure is having that exposure. If you don't hear it, you don't know that you like it. So it was one of those things. I took it from there. I was a record collector starting in my early 10, 12 years old. I was buying records and that kind of thing, and I still do. So I've always just had that openness to listening to whatever's out there, whatever I find. Um, Going back to USC, when I was at USC and the student DJ at the Carolina radio station, the music library, we were still playing records at the time. This was in the mid 80s. And the music library that you would walk into across from the studio had about 20 or 30,000 records in it of, of all kinds. And so I would walk in there to pull music for the radio show that I was about to do. And I would stand there with my eyes closed and just reach out and grab records off the shelf, stack them up and play whatever I found. And I found some really interesting stuff that way. Um, but I mean, I blame that 4 years of my life. I got into African pop, Brazilian music, blues, reggae, um, heavy metal, and industrial noise bands that most people wouldn't even consider music. It's just sounds. um, so that's why I say I usually just say, oh, I listen to what I like, and that's a pretty wide range.
I love that you say it's about the exposure. If you've never had an opportunity to hear something, you don't know that you liked it. And so it's phenomenal that you listen to all types of music on those, what did you say, 15 years worth of Saturdays. I mean, that really influenced you and impacted your taste. I mean, I think that's wonderful. And, you can appreciate, like you said, good music. It doesn't matter what the genre is or, what the type is. You just like good music. So that's pretty cool.
The other side of this coin is that's recorded music. That's the stuff you hear on the radio, the stuff that everybody kind of gets in the culture. Um, but I've also been playing and performing music forever since I was a kid. I took piano lessons as a kid. About middle school, I realized that, hey, I could join the chorus and I didn't have to practice an instrument at home, but I could still sing and play music. Yeah, this is my and I've sung choral music since I was 12. Sang it in church choirs, every church I've ever been in. I sang it in high school, college choirs, and I've been in community choirs for the last, 30 or 40 years as well. So, and I laugh because I tell you that was born out of my childhood laziness because I didn't want to practice an instrument. But
Right.
I've stuck with it because I realized that being in a choir and singing choral music is like it's it's like being in an orchestra, except the instrument is right here. It's your voice. And if you have a group of 20, 30, 50, 60, I remember my high school choir was 75 kids, big choir. But you have to learn discipline. Even if you're not practicing at home, you got to practice with that group. And you've got to be able to listen to the director. You've got to be able to listen to each other. There's a lot of parallels. We're talking about business here. There's a lot of parallels with me. I can make you a huge metaphor about singing in a choir and working in a business. It works because you've got to listen. You've got to know what your part is. You've got to know it well enough that it fits with the other parts, and they've got to know their part well enough that it fits. If one person in this 75 voice choir is flat, you're going to hear it, or misses an ending, or comes in early. You're going to hear that one person, and they're going to be embarrassed. And it doesn't quite work. But when it does work, it's one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard. There are choirs out there that much better than I've ever sung in, that just it sounds like the angels singing, basically.
Mhm. I absolutely love that. I think that's a great metaphor. And I'm curious to know, when you started taking piano lessons, was that something that you wanted to do, or was there somebody that encouraged you? Tell me about that backstory.
No, this is funny because this is how I graduated from piano all the way to chorus. My parents forced us to take piano lessons in elementary school. We had a piano teacher that lived around the corner from us, so we could walk. And every Saturday morning, we'd walk over there. We'd take our piano lessons. We'd go home and we'd practice a little bit during the week and everything. Go back, and I was never great at it. I was never very good. The two-hand thing really just kind of got away from me a lot. Anyway, but I did it long enough to get through the elementary composition books and stuff that they would run you through. Um, Sixth grade hit, and up the street from where the piano teacher lived, at the front of the neighborhood, there was a bowling alley. And the bowling alley had youth leagues, but they were also on Saturday mornings. So there was a conflict. And mom and dad said, well, if you want to go bowling, you've got to continue to do music. And by then we were in middle school, my brother and we were able to join band at school. So we did band instead of piano, and we were able to go bowling Saturday mornings.
That is such a great story, and I think you'll really appreciate this. So I went to elementary school in the mid '80s, and that was really when they started doing like the keyboard and the Mac, and we started playing the recorder and all those things. And it's amazing. My elementary music teacher, her name was Miss Souls, Soles, and I just thought that was the coolest thing when I got older because I'm like that was a soulful name for a music teacher. But I really enjoyed being able to play on the keyboard and then the notes would appear on there was that old Apple with the green screen, the music notes would pop up. And so then I started playing the violin. I played that third, fourth, and fifth grade. It was one of those community music programs. And then when I went to middle school, I played the clarinet. I wanted to play the saxophone, but everybody wanted to play the saxophone at that time. And so I played the clarinet, but I really, really enjoyed it. And that's one of the things that I do want to get back into playing music. It's just really relaxing. I think it's good for you. And so I love that you love good music. So we talked a little bit about just your passion for music. Can you talk a little bit about how you build community and connect through music?
Oh, absolutely. So, for example, every year at Christmas time for the last 20 years now, I've done a benefit concert involving a bunch of my musician friends who are much more talented than I am on stage, um, playing Christmas music. And this kind of came out of me bringing gospel music shows to the church I was at the time every once a month. The first year I did this back in 2006, I'm looking at the schedule going, "Oh, what am I going to do for December?" So let's do some of my friends, have them come in and play some Christmas tunes and just have something really informal and get together and do that. And so I put an email out and asked a bunch of my friends, and every one of them said yes. Oh, we'd love to. So we did that the first year. I had 11 or 12, I think, folks playing from anywhere from solo musicians to a couple of multi, 3 or 4 piece bands, that kind of thing, mostly in a quieter acoustic setting. It was a church after all. We weren't, playing the rock and roll type Christmas stuff necessarily at the time. But we it I decided, okay, if we're going to get this many people together and play some Christmas tunes, we need to take up an offering. It is in church after all. What do we do with that money? So we started giving that offering to a local charity. And it kind of ballooned from there because after that very first year, I was like, oh, okay, this was fun. And then within weeks, I kept getting questions. Oh, we're going to do this again next year. And I hadn't even thought about it. Sure, why not? Okay. Um, so, and literally it's been this year, this December, it'll be 20 years that we've done this. And I've had everything from, local singer-songwriters to some major label touring artists that friends of friends have known and come in and sat in with us and done a couple of songs each, that kind of thing. So it's become its own thing over the years. But somebody told me once, about halfway through this last 20 years, they said, you're about the only person that I know that could have pulled this off because you know all these people. And that really is just a matter of just having those connections over the years and keeping those connections over the years. Um, it's I'm fortunate to have a lot of talented friends. I've gotten to know most of the musicians in town because we haven't talked about this part of my career background yet, but I wrote for the local entertainment newspaper, a weekly paper called Free Times. I wrote for them for 28, 30 years almost, writing about local music, concerts, things like that. And so, yeah, that's how I got to know a lot of these folks because I was doing press coverage for them in the paper. And of course, they love getting written about and talked about. So they make friends with the writer, me. And but I mean, it on a local level, when you're talking about music and performance, the community that is involved around that is just very supportive. They come out to the shows. They follow these musicians to different venues around town. Um, I have some friends that play music, and they've got a couple of really super duper fans who are in their 70s, for example, and the fans showed up at one of their gigs last week and said, "Oh, we're here to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary with you." You know, that's great support. That's community, and that's somebody that is taking that milestone and sharing that with musicians that they adore that they love. So
That's powerful, and you nailed it. It's community, it's leading with heart. I just love that you've done that for so long, so thank you for bringing people together over the years and, also taking up that offering to give to a charitable organization. Do you feel as though that was something in you because of your background, because of your upbringing? Like, what motivates you to do something like this? Because I know that is not an easy task to bring so many people together for a program, for so long.
I will go back. I can, if we want to go backwards and trace, we talked about my upbringing. I didn't mention the fact that my parents really kind of instilled the volunteer service portion of things in me. They and still are. They're 81 years old. They still live in the Somerville area, and they have been volunteering and providing volunteer service in the Charleston area for over 50 years to various organizations. Everything from food pantries and clothes closets to the current one that they've been with and volunteering weekly for the last 15 years at least is a place called the Teacher's Supply Closet, which takes in donations of school supplies and redistributes them free across the Tri-County area down there in Charleston to teachers that need them and schools. And that example, because they took me along with them. I mean, from the time I was 3 years old, able to crawl out of the stroller, I was packing food bags, you know, playing with canned food and stacking cans up, or putting clothes on hangers, or it just was what we did.
Mhm. Absolutely love that. That warms my heart. So kudos to your parents. They did a good job also. And just, it's amazing how that ripples throughout life. So thank you for continuing to do that. And I'm sure you've instilled that into your children as well. I'm curious to know, what advice would you give to your younger self?
um, Invest money a lot earlier
Nope,
and leave
that's
it
a good
there.
one.
That's one of those things. Like one of my accounting friends says, compound interest is your friend.
Right.
The
The eighth wonder of the world.
it is, and it's one of those things, and the market, despite current volatility, shall we say, always rises. So if you and I'm not necessarily talking about just money. If we really want to get philosophical here, if you invest in yourself, whether it's monetarily or whether it's through education, whether it's through investing in your job, uh, chances, it's going to pay off over the long term. You may not see it right away, but it's going to happen. So, I wasted a lot of time in college and just after, where I was mainly just out to have fun. Not that there's anything wrong with having fun, but too much fun can get you into a little trouble. But yeah, getting that work and life balance right, it takes time. It takes some experience, and you don't always have it in the right spot. But I will say, we talked about family earlier and kids. The old cliche about "don't blink" is a very real thing. Make sure that you're paying attention, and make sure that you're not focusing so much on work that you do miss out on those recitals, the beach trips, the art shows, the science fairs, whatever. That's important stuff, and you don't really realize it until later on. Nowadays, we have the wonder of Facebook memories to let us know, oh, here's what happened 15 years ago with our kids when they were 3, and now they're graduating high school. Um, Most of my children's pictures are on floppy disks.
Oh, wow.
So, That's how long ago it was. We had I still have the computer disks and the drive to be able to do that. But yeah, we were able to do that. I mean, I have actually sets of home movies. My parents took home movies of us when we were kids on a format called Super 8, which was a little reel to reel video recorder, handheld. And each one of those reels maybe holds about 15 minutes of video. And yes, my father transferred those into VHS at one point and then onto digital later on. So we have some of those old home movies that I can watch. I don't remember. I was a little kid. I don't remember those times, but I've watched those videos enough. I feel like I do. So,
Those are absolutely beautiful memories. Um, I'm curious to know during challenging times, what keeps you hopeful? How do you stay positive?
well, without getting too far into the weeds, that, I'll just say that it's a very challenging time right now in a lot of ways. Um, I don't think I really need to elaborate on that here, but what gives me hope even now is that I still feel like there are people willing to work together to make good things happen and to stand up and speak out for what they believe is right, for what they think needs to be said in the face of so much out there that is wrong.
Mhm. I love it. That's very powerful. So no, thank you for that. Um, Also something that just crossed my mind too, you know, are there like is there one thing that you do as a leader that, you know, shows you care? Like what makes a difference with your team? What are the small things that you do that keep your team inspired or motivated? Um, what's a small thing that you do that keeps your team inspired or motivated that may help someone else that's leading a team as well?
Well, we mentioned work life balance. Um, I've always been the manager that realizes that my employees have a life outside of this store. They're yes, I have them for 8 hours a day, but they have other things going on. They have family issues. They have things that come up. I think really the key for me in keeping a nice, motivated, loyal, and productive staff is being flexible with them. With it, there's operationally, there's things I have, things that have to happen, but there's a lot that we can adjust to. If I have somebody that needs to be out for this or out for that, and we can make it work within the operational structure of the business, um, why not? There's no reason to say no. Oh, I'm going to force you to come into work. No, that's not how it works. You come in, you do your job, you get paid. But when you have needs outside of it, or you need a schedule change or things like that, if I'm flexible and work with them, they remember that and they know that. And they realize if I went over here to this other job, they would tell me to take a hike and you're fired if I tried to not show up for work one day because of this or that. So it's it doesn't really cost me anything to the business to be nice to my employees and to allow them to do things and change things around within reason. I mean, and even they realize we've got to have the store staffed to a level we can take care of the customers. Um, but no, it's I think it's just the main realization is that yes, my employees have a life outside of the store, and if they know I realize that and allow for that, then they're more likely to come in with the right frame of mind to work when they do.
I think that's amazing. Talk about leading with heart. You know, you're recognizing that you have people working for you. You know, sometimes I think we forget that. So the fact that you recognize people, you celebrate people, and you don't just focus on the job and performance, I think that really makes a difference. And, you know, that's also leading with empathy and leading with compassion as well. Because, I mean, life happens. There are days where I say life is lifing. And so, you know, you have to deal with it. And it's great to hear that you're flexible and you've seen the benefits from that. Is there any message or anything that you would like to leave with our listeners that you did not share? You covered so much. You're just a wealth of knowledge, but is there anything that you would just like to leave listeners with?
What I would always tell my kids is, because they're of that generation now in their 20s, they're looking to the future and going, well, what can I do about any of this? What difference am I going to be able to make with all these huge problems facing the world or whatever? And again, drawing on the life of service that my parents had, that they instilled in me, that I've hopefully tried to instill in my children, I tell them, I said, look, even as one person, there's still things you can do to make that difference, whether it's just being nice to somebody, whether it's sticking up for somebody who is being discriminated against or being bullied in public. It's I think it was either a book or a movie, The Power of One. It's kind of a cliche, but it's true. It's just a matter of what that difference might be. It doesn't always have to be, oh, I'm going to save the whales today. The old Greenpeace stuff, and not that those folks aren't doing great work, but every one of those places doing that great work is doing it because of the individuals that are involved with it.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, I think you just summarized that so nicely. One person can make a difference, and I do believe that's the importance of leading with heart. And it makes me think about the story of the starfish. You see the young child walking down the beach and, throwing a starfish back into the ocean. And somebody's like, well, why are you doing that? There's so many. Well, it makes a difference for that one starfish. And so it's amazing how one act of kindness can ripple out. And I do believe that the more we have that type of kindness in the world, the better off we'll all be. And, you make a difference in your community. So thank you so much, Kevin. It was great talking to you. I appreciate you, what you do for the community, and your leadership. And I know you've shared some very wise pieces of information that will benefit our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.